One of my favorite musical bands of all time, as well as one of the most important to me, is Pink Floyd. And I think that is a sentiment that can be shared amongst many, many music listeners, and I'm not going to be the first or the last to say that. But with that being said, I've always wanted to kind of hop on here and just give my outlook on the best Pink Floyd album, in my personal opinion, and give my 2 cents on it, because I think this has been an eternal debate for so long. Pink Floyd fans and Pink Floyd detractors love to bicker and argue about Pink Floyd's albums. Is The Wall the best? Is Dark Side of the Moon the best? If you're more of a hipster, is Animals best? Me personally, the album that has always stuck with me the most on an emotional level and a visceral level, which I will go on the record saying I own the vast majority of their discography and I don't think Pink Floyd necessarily have a bad album, I would actually go with Wish You Were Here. And I think if you're wanting something more conceptual, obviously you gotta go with The Fucking Wall. It's actually kind of depressing to me that that album was made in the heat of the 1970s, and yet it is more applicable to our modern society than it was then, and I just think that's fucking depressing as hell. You know it's a fucking cynical, pessimistic world when Pink Floyd's The Wall is more on topic now than it was when it was created. But Wish You Were Here, it obviously deals with the vast majority of Roger Waters and the band's feelings towards Syd Barrett and his spiral into substance issues, as well as just his downward spiral into hell in terms of his life. There's obviously the famous story about how he literally wandered into the studio like when they were recording Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which Syd was so fucking unrecognizable to everyone that they could not place him. They had no familiarity. He was like an alien to them, which was funny considering Shine On You Crazy Diamond was about Syd, and it obviously dominates the track listing with different parts, which conceptually and thematically Pink Floyd have always loved to do this sort of part thing. But for me, if anyone ever wanted to know like my favorite Pink Floyd song, and that's saying a lot because across their entire discography they have so many timeless, incredibly sonically driven songs in so many different genres. Welcome to the Machine is probably my favorite Pink Floyd song of all time. The journey and odyssey it takes you on, the tension it builds, is something that you rarely hear in Pink Floyd's music. And they've obviously had more groovy sections, they've had more psychedelic and melancholic sections, more experimental sections, but the way that they dabbled in electronics across this record and on Welcome to the Machine specifically, as well as the strange sort of vocalizations and the way it's sort of buried in the mix in this really electronic fashion, and the growing tension and building sensation of the entire composition, sitting shoulder to shoulder with these riffs and these synths, it comes up to the surface in a way that feels like you're about to burst at the seams, and that has always gripped me with this sense of urgency and necessity. And I could literally make an entire video, which maybe in the future I will, about like Shine On You Crazy Diamond, but the multifaceted nature of that song and all of the avenues that it ends up finding itself in, beautiful songwriting and just genius. But for me, it's just the dynamics of this record that keeps me feeling like it's the best. Obviously, Pink Floyd are pretty much the masters when it comes to the hypnagogic, lackadaisical, sort of psychedelic feel to their music, the drifting nature, but the dissociative feeling that they embody across this entire record is unlike what you get on a lot of their other records, even their biggest, like The Wall on tracks like Comfortably Numb and Dark Side of the Moon, and I think something like Wish You Were Here or Welcome to the Machine could sit shoulder to shoulder with any of the standout tracks on either of those aforementioned records and really be able to hold their own weight. And speaking of Wish You Were Here, the scant and minimalistic approach to that entire song with the experimental sort of lo-fi approach in the introduction riff that ends up leading into an extremely minimalistic composition that is in pretty damn stark contrast to everything else on the record, which is pretty pristine and shimmering and full wall to wall with so many different moving parts that come together to make a single song. Wish You Were Here takes it in a much more raw and primal approach. And as you are going into that track before the last parts of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, I think it's a brilliant move to put that there, because you have Welcome to the Machine, which is right after the first parts of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and it builds that tension and it has that atmosphere to it that really bubbles up to the surface. Whereas near the end of the record, this sort of lament of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, Wish You Were Here plays out like this really sad, solemn farewell in this track of of reminiscing, and I think it shows that after all this time, it is one of the most simplistic Pink Floyd tracks, and they were always known for experimentation and pushing the envelope, pushing the boundaries sonically of what music was capable of, and using techniques that weren't really being used at that time frame. And yet this is one of the songs that has stood the test of time, and I think that is a testament to the genius songwriting of it. But Wish You Were Here, from start to finish, I think is a genius record that embodies so many real emotions. And obviously Pink Floyd have written about emotions in their music. They have always tackled very philosophical, deep topics, and they never shied away from doing that type of shit. So I'm not saying any of this to discredit the rest of their material, but there's something to be said about writing from a genuine place where you are going through that pain, where you're going through those emotions. And when you feel that at your core and you use that energy to filter into your music and create something that is timeless, that is raw, that uses those emotions in a positive or negative light, depending on how you see it, things will oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, will come out the other side sounding more raw than anything else you could do if you were just making music or writing songs based on a story you had in your head. Emotion is by far the capstone of great music, and a brutal look into mental health, loss, lamenting, dissociation, tension, and so much more. And it's just a bravo moment. And I understand that at the time there were a lot of people that didn't like Wish You Were Here. It didn't really rank high in a lot of Pink Floyd like discography rankings back in the day, and it didn't get the best reviews. People weren't as hot on this as they were records like The Wall and records like Dark Side of the Moon. And even when you're talking about the more like quote unquote fucking obscure, I'm putting that in massive air quotes, but if you are looking at the more unpopular pick, even records like Atom Heart Mother and Animals will oftentimes be held above it in regard. And I understand why those are fantastic records in their own regard, but for me, those are just the reasons that I personally adore Wish You Were Here. But what are your guys' opinions of this? What is your favorite Pink Floyd record? There literally is not a wrong answer, so be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. I can't wait to hear it. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.